What's going on, guys? So, this is how I start every class that I do, scope carving, precision rifle, whatever. And uh, it's always hit or miss in that some people say it's kind of redundant and they've already made the decision, and obviously they're taking a scope carving or precision rifle class. Other guys end up uh, telling me that it's one of their favorite parts of the class. And so, but it's something that takes a good portion when we start the class. And so I've been meaning to really record this as a live. And so I'm going to record this hopefully and then issue this out to all the students. So if you guys are a future student, here you go. If you guys are on Patreon, awesome. So the I did a video on decision making for optic choice, and that's something that I get asked regularly as far as red dot, magnifier, LPVO, variable optic, etc. But when getting into the precision rifle game or precision game in general, uh, there's so many options. Like I always say this in classes, if I put a camera or a plug in the back of everybody's head and I had 15 screens on a wall and I said precision rifle, there'd be 15 different guns up there for whatever came to their mind first. If I said scope carbine, there'd be 15 different scope carbines. So precision rifle, everything from a 223 Q fix to a 338 or a 50 or a 375 or can be construed as a precision rifle. Within scope carbine, you have everything from 223, 22 Creed, 6 Creed, 6.5 Creed, short guns, 6 arc, long guns in 6.5 Creedmoors, 24-inch, and then I mean honestly, even the Nemo, like the 300 Win Mags and stuff, come into that conversation. So, what fits your use? And so, I try to break this down into like a decision making process, not only for law enforcement, but also for anybody who's just trying to figure out what rifle best fits their application. So, one of the big like numbers I use a lot in class is like solve for your 80%. And your 80%, not somebody else's 80%, your 80%. So, what is your 80% use case? And for law enforcement who are trying to decide whether a scope carbine or something fits inside their uh, toolbox that they want to add, add a scope carbine program, whatever, um, the identification of what your requirement is within your job, what you do on a yearly basis, what distances are available to you inside your municipality, whatever it may be, is really key. And then identifying with what you already have where your gaps are. For somebody who's necessarily a civilian and looking to expand past a red dot, you have to identify what's your use case. Are you looking to dabble? And so I did a thing on with the optic choice, kind of deciding uh, where you're going to spend most of your time distance wise. Within rifles, I kind of start with the choice of if you're getting into the distance game, um, type of rifle first, caliber of rifle second, and then barrel length is kind of like a third follow on, kind of intermixed with barrel length. So, type of rifle. So, first off, we need to talk about bolt action versus semi auto. And so, civilian wise, let's talk about the differences first, and then I'll talk about kind of use case. So, bolt actions have been around forever. They're one of the oldest, like ongoing types of rifles we have, developed many years ago. Started as a single shot and then worked into a box magazine. And then we worked into a detachable box magazine repeaters. And so used in World War I, World War II, and are still being used today in PRS, in law enforcement, military applications. SOCOM just selected a new bolt action rifle for issue. So 100 plus years still in use. Why? So bolt action rifles are inherently super reliable, super durable, and inherently more accurate and easier to drive and easier to shoot well for most people. Semi-autos obviously started coming in late 1900s or late 1800s, early 1900s into World War I, World War II. The proliferation of accurized semi-autos is not a new thing necessarily. The accurized AR-15 is, but putting a scope on a semi-automatic rifle has been done since World War II, with M1 Grands and M14s into Vietnam. So you really have to choose which one's best for you. So what is the biggest determining factor? One, um, the the bolt action rifles are built in a way that it makes them easier to drive. In that, when you pull the trigger on a bolt action rifle, the firing pin falls, strikes the primer, bullet leaves the gun. In that, nothing else happens in the gun. So the 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 gun, you have to break your grip from the bolt to then manipulate the gun to then fire again. The other big difference is inside of a bolt action rifle, the firing pin is under tension caused by the cocking of the receiver. The manipulation of the bolt handle then cocks the shroud. It pulls the firing pin back. When you rotate the bolt down, it then puts the two surfaces of the sear, and that firing pin is then pulled back by its movement up the cocking ramp that is in the bolt shroud. By bolt shroud, if you guys haven't seen taken apart a bolt action rifle, you end up with bolt body like this. I know what this is going to look like. Sorry, it's how you have to draw it. You have bolt shroud. Okay, and then all right. So bolt body, okay, and then they have this ramp right here that's cut into the bolt body. This being the shroud. This right here is the top of the firing pin. Firing pin being going down into the bolt body with a spring. So as you manipulate the bolt handle, it moves this ramp up this one that's on the firing pin on the bolt body, and then it pulls the firing pin backwards. As you rotate the bolt back down, this right here that I've drawn, like these two lines, actually looks like something like this if you were to put it on its side. And so in a very simplistic way, consider that the top of the trigger, okay? And when you pull the trigger, you're actually releasing this surface right here, which then allows that firing pin to fall under tension. The time it takes from when you pull this trigger to when that firing pin strikes the primer is a term that is kind of the reason why bolt actions are so much easier to shoot consistently than a semi-auto, which is the difference in lock time. Lock time is the time it takes between when you pull that trigger, firing pin falls, strikes the primer. On a gas gun or a semi-auto, obviously there's a lot more going on. So charging handle, whatever it may be, that bolt carrier group moves back. In almost every bolt action, semi-automatic rifle I can think of, you have a hammer, and then it is on a pin, and you have a trigger, and it's on a pin. And as the receiver bolt carrier group is pulled back, it moves the hammer back, and the hammer then connects two surfaces that are on the hammer and the trigger, and then the bolt carrier group goes forward. Inside the bolt carrier group is the firing pin, etc. So as you go to pull the trigger, you remove the tension on those sear surfaces, hammer falls. But the hammer has to then move upon its entire, because it has to gain speed to then strike the firing pin then strikes the primer. So that minute difference of literally the firing pin being under tension of a spring and you pulling it falling, and you pulling a trigger, which then releases a surface. Hammer has to fall. Hammer has to then hit the firing pin. Firing pin then has to hit the primer, is a difference in lock time. That difference in lock time then makes it so in a gas gun, you have more time for you to put inputs from your body, from your cheek, from whatever. As you pull the trigger, you have more time before that bullet leaves the end of that muzzle. It's the primary difference. On the other side of things, the thing that I see a lot of people do is they go, well, I can build a gun cheaper than I can buy one. And so they try to build guns. And there's while an AR-15 these days is a really easy thing to build, there's some very important tools and things you have to do to make sure that it's reliable, gassed well, etc., which is like having headspace gauges and all those things. So I've watched a lot of people build ARs and they come to class and the barrel loosens up, the gun doesn't run, it's not gassed well, and they have all kinds of issues because they listened to the internet and just went, I can build a gun, watching Brownell's YouTube videos, and they combine a whole bunch of parts that just don't work very well together. So now, why would you want a gas gun then? Like, you're like, well, Joe, you're talking shit about gas guns. I'm not. Uh, so my community really perpetuated the advancement of the accurizing of an AR-15. This was brought about in GWAT, and why that came about is inherently before that point, we had M1 Grands that had scopes on them. We had M14s, but as the U.S. military went from the 308, 30-06, larger semi-autos down to like a 5.56, like in the AR-15, M16 variants in Vietnam, they went, hey, I want something that's accurized. We did in GWAT because we wanted something that didn't require a different magazine, different ammunition, but could still push the max effective range of rifles that we were already carrying. So you either had a choice of like a Macmillan bolt action 300 Win Mag or an AR-15. Like, and there wasn't, you had some M14s and stuff, but it was a different magazine, bigger bullet, like it was something nobody else was using. And so this pushed about the proliferation and the request of something like the Recce rifle, which was a dam neck program, and the Mark 12, which was then a regular NSW program, which was the Recce rifle was a 16-inch gun, and the Mark 12 was a reflex over the barrel 18.5-inch gun. So all that to say, the reason for that was to have the same caliber as everybody else, use the same magazines, and still have the ability to then push accurized fire farther out. So we have bolt action rifles, inherently more reliable, smaller magazines, slower between follow-up shots, but faster lock time. And then we have gas guns, which is inherently smaller caliber. We have AR-10s and everything now. Harder to shoot as efficiently, but can use like magazines, like ammunition, to maybe a unit or whatever. And so what's your choice? It really comes down to what your use case is. And the difference in lock time between them really does make it so, like if you were to put a Seekins or a GA Precision AR-10 in a vise and you put a bolt action both have Bartlein barrels built by a guy who knows what they're doing, put them in a vise, they're going to shoot very similarly with the right ammo. The gas gun will have some uh, some inputs caused by the carrier speed and the violence of feeding and magazines and all this magazine differences, that could lead to differences in SD but accuracy across the board, they're going to be very, very, very similar. So why do so many people have such a hard time shooting a gas gun as effectively as they can shoot a bolt gun? And why do things like law enforcement agencies continue to stick with bolt action rifles for a very long time? Is that it takes a lot more dedicated, consistent training to stay as consistent on a gas gun than it does on a bolt gun. Period. It just does. And you have to really kind of open up your expectation of accuracy with a gas gun. Not that it can't, but that your ability to then squeeze that accuracy as consistency out of that platform is going to not be as great. So bolt action that's the reason why it still owns PRS. Like, yes, there are some guys who shoot gas guns in PRS, but like when you start getting into like super small targets, super far away, the consistency that you get both out of velocity and your ability to shoot that gun as consistently just puts gas guns at a slight disadvantage. Not because of some mechanical accuracy issue necessarily, but just it requires so much more out of the shooter to be as consistent. So that's why I don't think bolt actions are going away anytime soon for law enforcement. And they're just a more reliable way to accomplish that task. Now, if you were to ask me back in my previous job, do I feel that I would ever need a bolt action rifle inside of what I used to do? like in a small frame or yeah, small frame. Um, no, like 308, 6.5 Creedmoor, 5.56. No, absolutely not. Because my expectation of, or I prioritize faster follow up shots and mag compatibility and over that increase in accuracy for what I do. Now, if you were to ask me if I was going to go hunt, shoot PRS, whatever, I have tons of bolt guns. So, um, you really have to identify what your priorities are and which ones fits better. Like, are you going to shoot QP matches? Or are you going to shoot PRS? Are you going to go hunting, or are you a law enforcement military guy? Uh, are you trying to have a gun that you can work on yourself, or are you going to have a gunsmith work on? Are you like, there's all these things that need to be really identified within your use case before you even select the type of gun. And we haven't even gotten into caliber choice, etc. So now, which one's right? The problem is in social media and the internet as a whole is that everybody's question they're asking is different. And so you're going to get a different answer. And that the answer to that question, because you're asking different ones, is going to be different. And so, but people get upset that somebody came to a different conclusion than they did. Uh, and then it becomes this like, well, why didn't you buy this? Because this works. That worked for you, and it might not necessarily work for everybody. So I really push you, as whether you're a future student of mine, you're coming to a class, you're somebody online who's just looking for like, hey, I've shot red dots. I'm thinking about going into precision game in some way. Which way do I go? So identify that first, and then once you identify the question, then you can figure out which one fits. For law enforcement, I tell people you need to identify what your red dot gun does and what your bolt gun does and what gap is in the middle, and then will a gas gun fill that? And is there a gap there in whatever you're doing? Because a lot of guys are trying to build a question to match an answer, not really truly develop a question. They want to buy a new piece of kit, so they're asking, how do I make a question fit what I already want to buy? And civilians do the same thing. It's like I get this where people ask me a question, and I'm like, you're not actually asking for my answer. You're trying to guide me to your answer. So, um, so it's a really long way to go. Bolt action versus semi-auto. Okay. So once you develop that, once you figure out that, and for most of you guys will be coming to my scope carbine class. If you're coming to precision rifle, the rest of this will kind of fit as well, which is caliber choice. And so within my scope carbine classes, it can be done with a 5.56 gun. It can be done with a 6 arc. It can be done with a 6.5. It's much less about caliber choice, especially since we have the distance for all of those, as it is holds, non-standard shooting positions, that kind of stuff. So what are you guys trying to pick and choose and use? And the way I tell people on caliber choice is, one, it's like, how big of a bullet do you want to shoot? How far do you want it to go? And what do you want it to do when it gets there? And again, yep, like there's some asterisks to this, and how the that's like the easy three. And then it's like, how often do you want to rebarrel your gun? And how much money do you have for training? Those two things are really important too. But let's just get to the basics. How big of a bullet, how far, and what do you want to do when it gets there? So, are you shooting a match? Are you shooting an animal? Are you defending yourself? Are you a law enforcement officer? Are you, like, what type, first, what size of bullet, but then what's the bullet options to accomplish the task you're trying to reach? So, without fail, I get young guys who are in law enforcement who go to a long range shooting school, and they come back to their team lead and they go, we need 6.5 Creedmoors. And then I get a call from a team lead who's like, okay, should we get 6.5 Creedmoors? And I go, in US law enforcement? No. And they go, well, like I said, use case, right? Distance. How big of a bullet? How far? What do you want to do when it gets there? For law enforcement, the last two are really important. How far, and what do you want to do when it gets there? And so the average distance they shoot is like 50 yards. It has to go through glass barriers, whatever. And in right now, there's way more options for barrier blind ammo, law enforcement special use rounds, etc. in 308 than there is 6.5. And the benefit of 6.5 comes in the external ballistics, which are at distances that you won't see in US law enforcement. You can't justify the use. And so you're trading options in one for a capability you're not going to use. And so on the civilian side, this applies too. Guys go, okay, I'm trying to get in long range. What do I need? What should I get? And I go, do you already shoot 5.56? Yes. Well, what about 6 arc? What about 6 max? What about 22 arc? What about, I go, okay, yes, they are bigger bullets. They have better BC, but what are you trying to do? Are you shooting QP matches? Are you just dabbling? And then how often do you want to rebarrel your gun? And how much training, what's your training budget? Because 5.56, 77 grain can be had for 65 to 80 cents, just over $1. 6 arc is like $1.70 a round. So you're going to get 2 to 3 times more training value out of a 5.56 gun using 77s, heavies, etc., than you will out of the 6 arc. And like, yes, I have 2 6 arcs. Again, I'm not a 6.5 hater. I have a dozen of them. And I'm not a 6 arc hater. I have 2 of them. Do I shoot those as regularly as I do 5.56, 6.5, like 308, etc.? No. The ammo's less expensive. The ammo's more expensive for the hotter rounds, and I see faster barrel wear. And so if I'm only shooting in distances where I'm not needing that benefit, why would I just have a benefit that I'm not going to use within my use case? So you have to identify use case. And so could that be AR-10? Could that be AR-15? Could that be 6 arcs, 6.5 Grendel? Like 100%. 22 arc, 22 Creedmoor. I mean, there's so many now, depending on what you're trying to accomplish. And so SOCOM just chose the 6.5 Creedmoor, both in 14.5 and 22 inch. So 308 is going away inside SOCOM. But again, old Uncle Sugar is footing the ammo bill and they're replacing barrels. So if you're not, and then those are different decisions. At the tier 1 guys who are running 6 arc currently, they're replacing bolts every 2,000 rounds. They're replacing barrels every 3 to 5,000 rounds, and they have pallets and pallets of ammo. Do you? Or is that something you want to have to deal with? A bolt might not be a big deal to you. They're a couple $100. You just replace a bolt every 2 or 3 cleanings, carry on. For some of you, it might be a thing. So bolt action versus gas gun, have to make that choice. And then you have to make caliber choice. And caliber choice has a bunch of factors that play into it. How big of a bullet? How far? What do you want it to do when it gets there? How often do you want to rebarrel? How much is your training budget? Okay. And so now if we're working through with the vast majority of the students I see, it's guys are coming from Red Dot. They don't want to fully invest in a bolt action rifle yet. Okay. They're trying to get into shooting a little bit farther with a gun that they're very familiar with, which is usually an AR-15. So they go, okay, I'm already shooting an AR-15. It's already in 5.56. I'm trying to shoot a little farther. Okay, so it's semi-auto, a little bit farther. They probably have a 12.5 or a 14.5 with a red dot, maybe a magnifier. Okay, so we're looking like, okay, 14.5 to 16-inch gun, most likely. Some guys start pushing SPRs, etc. if they're going directly in straight, like a dedicated longer range gun. And the vast majority end up at 5.56 because they're not going to see the benefit of 6 arc yet. Or they might not ever see the benefit depending on what their use case is. So that's kind of that walkthrough. Okay. And so we found bolt action versus gas gun, caliber, usually 5.56. I do see some bigger guns, 308s. I see 6 arcs every once in a while. I see 6.5 Creedmoor gas guns. I'm actually about to bring some 6.5 Creedmoors to a class I'm teaching next week. Okay, and then we have to decide barrel length. Because again, guys go, okay, well, I'm going to do a 6 arc. Personally, I have a 12.5 and a 20 inch. Those are 2 very different barrel lengths. In 6.5 Creedmoor, I have a couple 14.5s all the way to 24 inch 6.5 Creedmoors. So which one's right for you? Well, we have to go back to how big of a bullet, how far, and what do you want to do when it gets there? Okay, so how big of a bullet and what do you want to do when it gets there, are important in this. How far, if something is more of a battle rifle 500 in, you really start looking at the trajectory of the bullet, okay, and what velocity is really important to you. Okay, so if your 80% use case is 300, 400, 500 plus, then every little bit of velocity is going to start becoming really, really important. If my use case is kind of 500 and in, then the extreme velocity and squeezing out every foot per second is going to become less and less important. It's the same thing with 5.56, like rifle choice, right? If I'm doing stuff that's 100 yards, 200 yards and in, and it's mostly a red dot gun, do I really need an 18.5-inch rifle length gas to shoot a red dot with? No. Why? Because you'll never see the velocity or the gains that you get from external ballistics, wind deflection, etc., because you're just not shooting at that distance. Wait one, Eric. So he has a question. So the flow chart of barrel length, like now, if I'm like for us, we ran a 10.5 suppressed rifle, and then guys would take and put in their backpack the 18.5-inch upper, and then they would do whatever they needed to do to get where they would need the 18.5-inch upper. They would do what they need to do. They'd swap back to the 10.5-inch, and then they'd go back on their way. So really comes down to that kind of decision. So he's asking about suppressor choice. So this is a big thing that I talk about this more in class. If you guys come to class, we do a whole thing about kind of the velocity and pressure versus barrel length kind of equation that plays off. The simple answer is going to be a more traditional styled can. You are not going to get a direct correlation of muzzle velocity gain out of a suppressor, even a traditional styled can. Like you'll get some suppressor push, but it'll be very minimal. But with the proliferation of and the use of flow through cans, you're going to get significantly less bump in velocity, if any. Like things like Huxworks and Four Systems and Spectre Cat and whatever, the way that the baffles are working or is allowing almost all of the loss of pressure that's going to happen behind the bullet all to happen at once, instead of like a decreasing scale caused by the chamber capacity of each baffle. And so as you get, instead of it going to the first chamber, like your blast chamber or whatever, that fills with pressure, the bullet moves to the next one, and it still has some pressure behind it. Flow through cans allow all of the pressure that's going to be lost can flow into the can, and it doesn't have a decreasing scale as it goes chamber to chamber. And that's why they have all these vents that allow all the pressure. So you basically fill the entire can like one big chamber, and then the thing is then it vents out the end. And so there's never a stop that really creates this suppressor push behind the bullet. And so now, even in traditional styled cans, I always tell people it's like barrel length choice becomes guys want to play like the CQB, I'm, a damn neck dude, SBR, SB tactical braces, whatever. And now if you're on a team, you're already going to running ear pro already. Suppressors actually serve much different purpose than for most other people. So if you're jumping in your house and you're grabbing a can out of your closet because you hear a bump in the night, or it's in the back of your truck, you're not gonna throw on a helmet with Peltors and like, dude, you're running a can so that you have less sound from the end of the muzzle. And so everybody wants to run a K can on a short gun. And it's like, while it seems like small gun, small can, that's not how this is supposed to work. Like you're going to have more unburnt powder, more pressure, which is why those smaller guns are much boomier guns without a can. Like I run small cans on long guns. So 16-inch guns, like really it's like 13.9. Like, yes, you can run a much smaller. If you're gonna run, like I said, if you're gonna be running ear pro, it doesn't really matter. It's more for overpressure and stuff inside the house. But I tell people, I have an 11-inch 11.5 gun, and then I have a 13.9. If I put like a polonium K on my 13.9 and a polonium on my, now this could be a Surefire K and a Surefire like R556. This could be a Sandman and a Sandman K. This could be what K can, regular size can equivalent. if I have an 11.5 with a regular size can, which is what you'd want to run, I run a polonium on my 10.5, and I put that next to on a table next to my 13.9 with a K can. They sound very similar on the range. They're literally the exact same height. Like overall length, one's non-NFA, one's NFA. Obviously 13.9 pin and welded, etc. Literally the exact same length. Exact same. Put them next to each other. And so guys want to go like, well, tactical and CQB. And I go, dude, exact same length. There's literally no difference. Now, which one's going to have more velocity? The 13.9. Which one's going to have a little bit less harsh gas to the face, running of the system, carrier speed, all these things? 13.9. And so suppressor use really needs to be taken into consideration more so than it is. Guys tend to buy the rifle and then they just go out into the internet and they throw nets out and everybody has their opinion on what can's badass, kind of like rifle choice. And guys get talked into really a lot of the time not necessarily the best can for what they're trying to put it on. But everybody has to sell you on what their choice is so that way they feel better, warm and fuzzy on the inside, that somebody else has joined them in their decision making, thus making it more correct. So bolt action versus gas gun, caliber choice, and then barrel length. You really need to identify your use case. For the law enforcement guys who hopefully will be watching this down the road, I just highly encourage you guys to develop a good question. What I see a lot of, I get asked this a lot from guys who want to start scope carbine programs, is they go, where do you see scope carbines fitting? And I go, I don't work where you guys work. And so if you're a big rural department, you do a lot of man tracks, you do a lot of stuff that's outside. You do a lot of overwatches, like you do grove clearances, you do like, that's a very different use case than somebody working in a very suburban urban area. Now, does that mean that urban areas can't find distance that they might need a longer rifle, better ballistics, etc.? No, because dude, how far across is a mall parking lot? How far across is like different venues on city buildings, museums, like all these things create distance. And people go like, well, I work in Dallas, Austin, Houston, parades, all those things create opportunities for distance. And so we never have an option to shoot that far. Well, that's 90% of the time just plain wrong. And I do a lot of counter sniper and that kind of work where we talk through it and guys go, oh shit, I never thought about it that way. So type of gun, caliber of gun, barrel length. Okay. And like I said, for law enforcement, you need to figure out like where your duty rifle, CQB gun, team gun, whatever that fits. And then if you have a bolt action rifle, what that fits. And then what gaps inside your actual use case, your job, your daily operations, the things you do on a yearly basis, what are you missing? And then once you develop the question, and then you can use the question to find the answer. Don't pre-select an answer and then develop the question. And that's what I see even for civilians is they go out to the internet and they go, well, I want to buy a Ridgeline, a Cobalt, a Knights, a AR-10. It's like, okay, we live in a free country as of now. We're allowed to buy these things. If you just want to buy a gun, I'm the last person to tell you just don't go, just go, be a big boy, grab your wallet, go buy what you want to buy. Now, if you're actually looking to fill a need, then you guys really need to focus on the question instead of the answer. Because what happens is guys, and I've watched this with students who they listen to the internet, everybody who's got a code for every company on the planet, and they piece together with all their discounts and listening to all the best instructors ever. They build this perfect gun and they come to a class and they go, none of this works right. Like the reticle isn't what I want it to be. The caliber kind of sucks. I got too short, too long of a barrel length for what I'm really looking for. The can doesn't really work with it well. It's like, yeah, but you listened to all the right people, right? For all of these decisions that built into the system. Why is it not the perfect gun based off of, the innate awesomeness of everybody you asked. It's like, well, because and new shooters, I think, really have a hard time identifying their use case. And so that's why I tell people, I said, identify what you're going to use it for. Because then you can identify distance requirements. Like, am I going to go shoot QP? Okay, you can go look up videos, matchbooks, go on QP forums. Like, am I going to go shoot PRS gas gun? Am I going to go shoot like multi-gun, 3-gun? Am I going to go like am I going to go do running guns? Am I looking for something that's going to go in the bed of my truck to shoot coyotes? All of these have what you're going to be shooting, whether it's metal or meat. Okay, how far the distance use is. And then you can start thinking about how much consumable income do you have? How often do you train? Like, all these things aren't things that like take a 20-year, 30-year shooter to answer. You just need to start thinking about it like in a logical fashion, right? And so hopefully this wasn't redundant. And for some people, it seems kind of logical. And for a lot of people, I'm telling you, because I know this because I answer the questions on Instagram every single day, which is people are really lost and they don't know where to start. And they go, well, should I buy an AR-10 or a bolt gun in 6.5? And I go, yes. Like, okay, let's talk a little bit more. And we do the exact same thing I just did. Um, and sometimes it's like guys will go like, hey, is this a reliable and accurate gun? I've just always liked it and I want to buy it. That's a very different question than which one do I buy based off of your perceived use. Or not perceived, like what it will be perceived. It's whatever you are kind of looking at doing with it. So, anyways, I'm going to leave this up, and hopefully, I'd love your guys' feedback on Patreon. Please leave it in the comments below. For the guys who I send this to in the future for classes, if you guys still have questions, I can always re-record this. So comment below. This is going to be on YouTube as well. So comment in the YouTube comments. And if I need to, I can re-record or I can address it in a different way. But hopefully I'm trying to get guys to, I want students and law enforcement to have the gun they need, not the gun somebody else wants to sell you. Like, I have a lot of stuff. There's lots of people on the internet who really, really, really want everybody to like their stuff. But it's like, it's who you marry, the car you drive, dude, at the end of the day, all these things are decisions made for you, not somebody else. The watch you wear, the shoes you put on when you get out of bed. If you try to do that for other people, you're not going to be happy with the result. And I think inside, I watch a lot of people fight because they've already made the decision, and they made the decision without actually developing a solid question. They have an emotional investment in the answer, even though they never understood it when they made it. And so instead of just realizing, go, hey, I might have wasted some money, I might have bought the wrong thing, they're just going to like double down, flex real hard, and just kind of push through it. And eventually they get over it. They really are sick of fighting whatever they bought. They shoot somebody else's gun that's way easier for them to shoot. It does exactly what they want it to do. And then whether they buy another rifle, they sell the old one, put stuff up on Reddit so somebody else can buy it. They move into something that's a better fit. But I really want guys to develop their own question. And that takes some personal responsibility. So be a big person, sit down, write it out, what your use case is, like a goal sheet, right? Write it out. This is what I want to do. This is the distances I think I have to shoot. Like, these are the caliber options. This is how much they price per round. Like, I know it seems redundant, but for 5 or 10 minutes, 15 minutes of Googling, getting some information like that you can look over like a spreadsheet, it's going to lead to clarity for a lot of people. And then sanity check. And don't just ask one person. Don't just ask me or somebody. Like, ask a variety of people, but just be advised, a lot of people have monetary motivation for you to buy one thing or another, whether it's discount codes, etc. So in the end, I want you guys to have what you need not what I need you to have, because it benefits me in some way. So appreciate it. Wanted to cover this for a little bit. I'm going to save this video on YouTube. Like I said, like, comment, subscribe, follow me on Patreon. And hopefully this helps some of you guys. And I'll catch you next time. I'm Joe with Bruiser Industries, and I'm out.